The ladders, gone. The safety nets, completely vanished. The margins for error in our modern world have basically evaporated overnight. This explainer strips away all the noise and dissects the exact, ruthless mechanics of power, survival, and total collapse. We're looking deep into the architecture of quiet influence. You're about to see exactly what happens when a man hits rock bottom, and the absolute brutal psychological framework it takes to climb back out. $4,200. Let that number sink in for a second. This isn't just some statistic. This is a weapon. Imagine your phone lighting up in the dead of night. It's a message from his sister Maya. It's the medical bill for their mother, and collections are already circling. Andrew types back that he's working on it, but the terrifying truth? He's not. He has absolutely nothing left. This is that raw financial terror that strikes at 2 a.m. Chest tight, shortness of breath. Why does no one listen? Why do all the doors just stay shut? The panic arrives. And the terrifying part is, it doesn't leave. 6 months. That is how long it's been since the massive layoffs at Meridian Tech. 6 months of total silence. 6 months of watching every penny of savings just drain away. 6 months since the woman he lived with packed a bag and walked right out the door. This is a suffocating trap, and it's not just one man's bad luck. We are talking about a systemic corrosion of control. Resumes go out, no reply. Group chats go completely dead. That inner foundational sense that you can actually influence anything in your life, it dies. And in its place, something way darker starts to grow. Passive anger, quiet withdrawal, a desperate, frantic grasp for any kind of control. Malcolm X famously said, "Absolute power corrupts, but absolute powerlessness corrupts even more." Now, those words are no longer just philosophy. Right now, they are a literal diagnosis. Absolute powerlessness mutates you. Your brain's threat detection system permanently locks online because that constant economic precarity keeps the alarms ringing nonstop. It corrupts the mind so much more thoroughly than any excess of power ever could. It violently narrows your vision purely to short-term survival. This is the creeping biological reality of modern isolation. Helplessness is toxic, and trust me, it is highly contagious. A psychological breakdown like this forces a brutal choice. Look at the old Andrew. He's desperate, defensive, highly reactive. He walks around assuming everyone sees the world exactly as he does, and he absolutely burns with rage when they don't. The moment he's challenged, he freezes. But the new Andrew? That requires a cold, calculated framework, emotional regulation, true perspective taking, invisible influence. Because real power isn't about forcing others to move. Power is a basic human need to gently guide the small circle of life you can actually touch. And that mastery, it has to begin inside. You have to ruthlessly dismantle the internal enemy first. And no, self-absorption is not vanity. It is a fatal vulnerability. It's the silent, toxic belief that if people only understood how hard it is for you, they would just step aside and let you through. That belief locks a man entirely inside his own head, while the rest of the world just spins on without him. The research on this is ruthless, by the way. The inability to take another person's perspective guarantees weaker networks and total crushing isolation. Your cortisol stays elevated, and you lose the exact cooperation you desperately need just to survive. So Andrew begins the quiet, agonizing work of actually watching his own reactions. And then the external tests arrive. We're mapping out an escalating suspense loop here. Step 1, getting past the gatekeeper. Step 2, surviving the corporate minefield at Apex Digital. And Step 3, the quiet acquisition of power. Make no mistake, failure at any single one of these stages means a straight drop right back into the abyss. All right, Step 1. A text lights up from Derek, a former colleague. There's an opening at Apex Digital, and they're going to grab an informal coffee. Now, the old Andrew would have launched right into this desperate, cringy sales pitch. But the new Andrew, he feels that familiar spike of fear, and he just lets it settle. He knows the ultimate gatekeeper question is always, why should I risk anything on you? So Andrew doesn't beg. He looks at Derek and sees a man terrified of bringing any risk into his own team. Andrew completely neutralizes that fear. He solves Derek's internal anxiety. 2 days later, a 3-month contract appears. He's finally got a foot in the door. But getting in is just the start. Step 2 drops Andrew straight into a war zone. The office at Apex Digital is a minefield. You've got Lena, the team lead who runs every meeting like she's a prosecutor. The junior staff are practically walking on eggshells. Then there's Marcus, the quiet analyst who actually holds all the data but refuses to speak up. Andrew just watches. And then, Friday hits. A catastrophic bad data set drops. The massive client presentation is completely collapsing. Lena's face goes ghost white. The entire room freezes. Marcus looks like he wants to dissolve into the floor. The executioner's axe is literally hovering over the room. The old Andrew would have glued his mouth shut, just thanking God the target was on someone else's back. The new Andrew, he feels the terror in the room. He names it internally. And then he just breathes. He diffuses the bomb. He calmly states, the error is in the client's source file. Marcus flagged the inconsistency 2 weeks ago. Boom, he offers an immediate solution. Notice what he doesn't do. He doesn't claim credit. He doesn't attack anyone. He protects Marcus. He stabilizes Lena. He makes the entire room feel safe again. He seizes absolute influence, and he does it completely invisibly. This right here is the ruthless mechanic of human cooperation. People will always resist influence the very second they feel controlled. The guy who walks in and announces his obvious need for help, he triggers immediate defense mechanisms. Resistance instantly hardens. The modern workplace brutally punishes obvious need. But invisible influence, it triggers safety. When people actually believe they are choosing freely, their commitment skyrockets. You do not force people to see your value. You study exactly what makes them feel steady, and you provide it. Which brings us to step 3. Weeks turn into months. Andrew completely stops trying to force outcomes. He traces his own resentment back to its roots until it literally loses its teeth. And slowly, almost by magic, people start seeking him out. A senior director position opens up. Lena calls him into her office, and she puts his name forward. Not because he groveled, not because he begged, but because the entire team functions better when he is physically in the room. True power is never violently taken. It is willingly handed over by people who feel more capable just by having you in their presence. But we have to ask, what about the men who refuse this path? Because history is literally littered with guys who mistook force for power and left absolutely nothing but wreckage behind them. If you fail to win this internal war, you are facing a rising doom. It happens in 3 brutal stages. First, private erosion. Second, a total relational collapse. And third, severe public consequence. This is a pattern that scales. It goes from a single lonely apartment in Chicago to destroying entire companies and eventually ripping apart the wider social fabric. Take this as a severe psychological warning. Outsiders will look at a surface failure and they'll just call it laziness. The man trapped inside feels the walls closing in and concludes the whole game is rigged against him. They're both dead wrong. The real, fatal vulnerability is the unexamined self. It's this toxic belief that influence must be violently seized. Leaders who reach for force at the stage, they're just accelerating their own destruction. The man who cannot govern his own reactions cannot govern anything. It's just a brittle hunger for domination that recreates the exact same harm he once suffered from. Let's look at the actual biological timeline of what happens when a man's sense of influence drops below that critical threshold for survival. Month 1. Your sleep shortens, your focus dangerously narrows, your body locks into this permanent, low-grade threat state. Month 3, the relational collapse accelerates. Partners leave, your networks completely fracture. Month 12, your ambition turns inward, and then it turns completely toxic. Studies on male loneliness track this exact terrifying curve over and over again. The systems that once absorbed all of our energy, they are growing more brittle every single day. And that leaves you with a chilling ultimatum. A continued drift into total, suffocating isolation, a dark turn toward open resentment, and a desperate, flailing search for control. Or the quiet mastery that Andrew chose, the daily, ruthless, unglamorous work of naming your emotions and offering other people steadiness. Each path radically rearranges who actually holds influence and who's just left to rot outside of it. The only question that matters right now is, which of these paths have you already begun to walk?